All right. Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Builders podcast. I'm your host, Kyle McGee. Super excited for today's episode. I got someone near and dear to my heart, Nathan Pooley. Nathan Pooley is a devoted husband, father, pastor, surfer, and friend. He serves as the lead pastor of Upper Room Church, a vibrant, spirit-led community he co-founded with his wife, Caitlin, in Pensacola Beach, Florida. Nathan's passion for Jesus and the local church is evident in his dynamic leadership and commitment to fostering authentic relationships. His vision for multiplication has led to the establishment of a new campus in Gulf Breeze in 2024, furthering the church's mission to move people toward Christ, community, and calling. Beyond his pastoral duties, Nathan is an avid surfer, hunter, and fisherman who cherishes exploring new places and spending quality time with his family. Welcome to the show, Mr. Nathan.
It's good to be here, Carl.
And Nathan has been instrumental, has played a huge role in my life and my faith journey. So excited for the listeners, all 25 of them, to hear Nathan, what he's got to share. So how you doing today?
Good. Yeah, it's a good day.
It's a good day to have a good day, right? That's how you lead your openings a lot of times. And I echoed that. So to get the conversation started, I'd love for you to kind of dive into a little bit of your background and what you were doing kind of early in your career and then what you're currently up to.
Yeah, that's a good question. I went to Milton High School, so I didn't grow up in Gulf Breeze, Pensacola Beach, but we visited a lot. You know, the beach was a big part of my life. And growing up, my mom always took us out there. And once I graduated from Milton High School, I went to it was PJC at the time. But, PSC, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And then I took a couple semesters there and I just felt like I was supposed to go to seminary. And so I enrolled in a seminary and it's in Springfield, but it was remote. And so I did most of my classes at a church in Pace. And that took, about a year and a half, 2 years. And I went from that to once I finished up, I didn't have many opportunities, especially not full-time opportunities. So I went to work at Pepsi and I stayed there about 10 years, and did kind of ministry on the side, and Pepsi was like my main gig. And then I got some opportunities here and there with ministry stuff, but I met my wife early. We started dating when, oh goodness, I was 18, I think. And so we got married pretty early. So Caitlin and I, we've been together, married 16 years this month. So.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah. Yeah. She's kept me on the straight and narrow. You know what I'm saying? That's been the highlight of most of what we've done through I've been able to do, I feel like, ministry wise. So
yeah. So you worked at Pepsi, a corporate job. Let's go a little bit deeper there. Or actually, let's before that. So you felt a calling to ministry before you went into the workforce.
I did. Yeah. I wasn't really a Christian or growing up. I became a Christian my junior year of high school. And so I just didn't really know what to do. And I felt like the one time I've really heard the voice of the Lord, it was, I was in high school, and it felt like, that was kind of the direction change for me to pursue ministry and preaching. And so, that's what I did. It took a while, like the process and the calling to get from that point to what I'm doing now. But I know I can look back and see how Pepsi and a lot of the jobs that I worked, but Pepsi was probably the main one. It was very instrumental in what I'm doing now. I mean, I learned more about, I would say, ministry in the marketplace than I did in seminary.
Part of what I really want to hear you talk about, go deeper in, because you've been extremely influential in my life and changing my perspective on ministry in the workplace or faith in the workplace. In the marketplace. Talk to me about your perspective on what role faith has in business and the marketplace.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle. I don't see a separation in the sacred and the secular. I think God is just as active in the marketplace as he is in the church, because I think the one big reason is that's where people spend most of their time. Church is maybe an hour a week, 2 hours a week, but you're spending a majority of your time in your vocation, your calling. And I think, ministry, number one, is about people. And so it needs to be happening where people are. It took me a long time to see that, but I don't really see a separation in the two. And the churches that are doing really effective ministry are impacting the marketplace. They're empowering their people to impact, their worlds where they work and, serve. And I think that's a really big part of what Upper Room's culture is like, but just empowering people to make a difference where they are, and where they are is a lot of times it's at work. It's what they're doing during the week.
Yeah, and you have opened my eyes to, you can't turn it on and off. Like if you're truly a Christian, right? It's how you live your life all the time, right? So you don't have to be pushy and like really shove it down people's throat like about Jesus and like this is how we're going to do it, but it's how you hold yourself, it's how you lead, it's how you treat people when a deal's going bad or a crazy homeowner or whatever it is, like keeping constant and keeping your faith at the forefront of everything you do, right? I'd like to hear about the Upper Room journey. And I think the listeners could behoove, like when I started coming to Upper Room, I was raised Catholic in the Catholic Church. And after my dad passed, my mom started going to this little church because she had moved into a condo on Pensacola Beach. And I was kind of giving her a hard time, like, Mom, I thought we were Catholic. Like, what are you doing? I'm going to church by myself over here now. Like, what's the deal? Yeah. And I go to this third story of a marina in this little room, and there's like 30 people up there. And there's this dude that just came out of the waves. I'm not a surfer. I have some surfer buddies, but I don't completely resonate with that crowd. But, this guy looks younger than me, and you like delivered just this like super powerful message. And I can't remember what it was on, but I completely drank the Kool-Aid and I was like, okay, I see why you're coming here. But there was 30 people. Now there's like, I don't know what the last Easter Sunday, but there was like 500 or something, 300. What has been that journey of growth, from where you started to where you are today and where you're going?
Man, I miss those marina days. That was a special place. Yeah, God's been really good to us. The marina, the way that we ended up there was, the mayor of Gulf Breeze now, JV, he bought the marina and to open us. He always wanted a Pensacola Beach surf shop, him and Yancey, Big Yancey. And marina came up, he bought it, and the third floor was empty. And so the surf shop was on the second floor, and we wanted to start a little outreach. It was only supposed to last 6 weeks, and he gave us the space, for free. And at the end of 6 weeks, there was like 30, 40 people come in, and he encouraged us to keep meeting. And so we just kept meeting. And, we kind of, it morphed into the name Upper Room because it was on the third floor. I mean, in the beginning days, it was very unorganized. I mean, you could probably tell it was like, we may start at 6, we may start at 6:30. It was on Thursday nights, very chill. But the goal was to create a place where people who felt uncomfortable maybe in church or like a traditional church would feel very invited and welcomed. And that was the goal. It was a unique spot on the water and above a surf shop. But we really wanted to attempt to create a culture where people who just never been to church or never been to church at all in their life would come there and feel at home. That just continued. We were at the marina from 2012 to 2017. That's when we kind of went from Thursdays to Sundays. And then when we went to Sundays, it was like game on. Most people that try church for the first time, they try it on a Sunday morning, not like a Thursday night. And so when we moved from Thursdays to Sunday mornings, we started seeing some pretty good growth. We went to 2 services within a year, and then ended up in 2 locations by 2020. We had the marina, and then we moved down to the beach church because it was larger. It was like 3 times the size. And then COVID hit, and then we had nobody. So we went back to 30, not 30, but like literally we went back down to 100 or so after COVID. And then, Easter, there were 3 services this Easter, close to 900 people. And so
900.
It's been a really incredible journey, but we've tried to keep the culture and we've tried to keep the vision the same. We do have, we're meeting in traditional churches, now, but my big thing is I feel like you put the cookies on the bottom shelf, like make it practical. Clear is better than clever, and try to make it just as practical and life-giving and applicable as we can. And so that's what we try to keep it up front. And then we try to keep the culture here as a staff and team as a startup. We want to stay a startup. We're always going to change. We're always going to try new things. We're not going to get married to a method, and we're able to stay fluid. And I think that's been really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'd like to go a little bit deeper on your, specific journey. And so you were still, if I remember correctly, when you started it as the Thursday night, you were still working full time with Pepsi.
Yeah, I worked full time with Pepsi all the way up until, goodness gracious. Yeah, I was in Mobile on Thursday. So a lot of days, a lot of nights I had an office in Mobile. I would get to the marina about right after worship was ending, and I would just walk in and share. But yeah, from 20, I think to 20, goodness gracious, it's hard to remember. But yeah, at least 3 years. I was working 3 or 4 years with Pepsi full time. And because we were on Thursday nights, so and I had good bosses. They knew what I was doing on Thursdays. They made sure, they were totally good with me leaving on time to make it for Thursday nights. And then, at the time, Ben Martin, he was taking every other week. He works he's at Pace Assembly now in Pace. But so we had a lot of good help, and we had kind of a great team. But no, I was full time at Pepsi. Nobody really was on staff until about 2018. We actually launched the Sunday morning church and really didn't have anyone on salary. It was kind of all on faith, and all the giving that came in went to the church itself, the plant, and doing our best to get it healthy. Most church plants don't make it, like businesses.
Yeah.
Over half of them don't make it 2 years. And then the ones that make it past 2, over half of them don't make it to 5.
What was that leap like going from where you had a little security? You had a good job. You liked it. I mean, it's clear if you come to not as much recently, but maybe in the past 5 years, like you weaved Pepsi into just about every sermon there for a little bit, just giving you a hard time. But you liked your job, right? You had good bosses. You had a sense of security financially. What was that leap like going from working a full-time job and doing this on the side to going all in?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I cried my last day at the office. I was walking out with my stuff crying. I got in my car and I just thought, I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, because I'd put in 10 years there. They had a great plan of advancement. Like I could have stayed there forever, and I loved the people I worked with. And it was almost like this moment. I'll never forget it. When I'm walking down the hallway, leaving my office is empty now. And I was like very emotional. And I thought, Lord, if you don't come through here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to start back, where I am now here. And it was probably the biggest jump of faith I've ever taken in my life. I go back to my wife because she's a nurse, and she was just encouraging me. She's like, had a good job and was like, we can make this work. We have some time to where you can devote, what you need to the church, even if it can't, pay you or some, right now. And so she had to be in it with me. If she wouldn't have been fully in on it, and we kind of started making some changes financially to prepare for the possibility of, all right, I'm going to take a big decrease to do this. But I just felt in my heart, I would rather try it and fail than to just sit with it the rest of my life and never have tried, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes great sense. And it's really similar. It is the entrepreneurial journey. Your entrepreneurial journey is just tied to your faith, and it's starting a church, right? It's similar to starting a business. There's so many unknowns. There's so many, you don't know how you're going to do payroll or how you're going to afford to live. You have a kid, I think you had Asa at the time, right?
He did. It's like 6 months old. It was wild.
6 months old, right? So you have this, as a man of the home, you have the sense of security of providing. Your wife is providing, has a sound job. There was something that came into my mind when you were sharing that. Behind every great man is a greater woman. Caitlin, talk to me a little bit about the impact and the influence Caitlin has had on your life.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's no way that I just wouldn't be able to do, ministry without her. I think ministry, probably entrepreneurship, period, but marriage is so important. And it's the most important part of our lives when we get married. And if the marriage isn't healthy and working and, life-giving, it doesn't really matter how everything on the periphery is doing. And Caitlin has just been so encouraging. She sacrificed so much to see this happen. And then I can get really discouraged. Like I could get really in my head. I can get really down. I kind of had an Eeyore mentality. In my mind, I didn't think I was kind of preparing for this to not work. but she was always like, when I was really down, she would be up. And she was like, she was this constant voice of encouragement, just my number one fan. The first several years, I think, of messages, they were terrible. I mean, they were okay, but it was like, didn't really matter. She always had something good to say. She was always front row. Like, I wouldn't even have wanted to try if she wouldn't have been fully on board. And God spoke to her too. I think that was the big component. Like, we started feeling this nudge, but she also was feeling the same thing. And so I can't say enough about her, dude. And then I still feel that way. I always tell people if she ever left, I'm going with her. You know what I'm saying? This is gotta
100%. And I think even today or yesterday, today's Monday, we're recording this on a Monday, and it's encouraging to see you even yesterday in your message. You are looking at Caitlin for something. You're looking at her, in a lot of your message, right? And I mean, that's encouraging for me as a newly married, coming up on 4 years, right? To like, that's your rock. Similar to you, Peyton saved my life in a plethora of different ways and continues to uplift me and encourage me. And we wouldn't be nearly in a position where we are without our spouses. And so talk to me a little bit about when you're giving the message, like, what are you thinking about when you do? Is it for approval, or is it for like a encouragement, or is it just a habit?
I think it's a habit, but I also think, it's hard to read the room, especially if it's like, 30 or 40% of people in the room never been. And so I think she's almost like a temperature gauge. I can tell, okay, if something was funny or not funny, or maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm checking in with people in the room that I think I have relational chips with to kind of get a read on how it's going. And so but she's just always, even if I'm crashing and burning, she's smiling, Yeah, so it helps me to stay above the water if I feel like I'm, getting low up there or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's funny. But I was actually telling Peyton that I was interviewing you today, and she's like, ask him about this. Shout out, Peyton. I'd encourage anyone listening that if they're getting stale in their church journey, like, come check out Upper Room, because I think Nathan and everybody, the whole team, there is something there, right? That it's very organic, it's natural. You don't have people like shoving it down your throat, but I feel encouraged and I feel inspired leaving there. I think that you have a special gift and talent when you get on stage. Like, you're a pretty introvert, but when you get on stage, like, there's a whole different person that comes up there. I'm interested on how much preparation goes into each sermon you give, and then how has that evolved over time?
Yeah. So in seminary, we were told 1 hour per minute. And I don't know anybody that has a ministry job that has the time to do that. But I block out at least a day and a half. So, Wednesdays are, typically my full study day. So I'll put in a full day, but I'm typically carrying it around all week, so I think it was John Maxwell, who he was a pastor before he was a leadership guru. And he said, I stopped preparing for sermons. He's like, I just treated every day like I was preparing for a sermon. And so he was just read, and filing has helped me tremendously. And I don't keep like hard files, but with, iCloud and notes and different note systems, like, once I have the topic or the text, I can pull from that, but I do it, at least a day and a half. In, the way that we operate here, I'll have the message done by like Thursday at 11. That way we can get everything printed for the handout and for Sunday. And so I have to kind of, be pretty disciplined with Monday through Thursday to make sure I'm putting in the time that I have it ready to go by by Thursday lunchtime.
So that's a day and a half, and you're coming up on 10 years. When you were first getting going, would that like get in your head of like, oh man, I've got it prepared, I don't have it really clear, you're nervous? Or talk to me through like where your head was at when you were first kind of getting going.
I was anxious a lot. Sometimes it'd be like Saturday night, I'm pulling out the message, or I found out pretty quickly if I didn't put in the time early in the week, I'm setting myself up to not take any days off. So if I didn't put it in like early on in the week, get it settled, then Friday and Saturday, which is, I try to take those days off. I'm worried. I'm thinking about the message. I feel like I don't have it ready. And so I try to do my best. One of the things I try to live by is that the Holy Spirit is just as present in the preparation as the presentation.
Oh yeah.
And so, he can tell me, God, what he wants me to say on Monday. And that's kind of bled into how we've done the year. So we plan the full year out now. And so that was a lot of frustration too. Like we'd end a series and then it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? And then planning the year out in the next year in the fall has just been so helpful because now I'm reading books for series that we're going to do at the end of the year. And so I'm not trying to get all this prep work done like week to week. That just caused me to have a ton of unnecessary anxiety. I was just doing it to myself kind of thing.
Did you learn that just by like, okay, this isn't working, like we got to figure out a different way? Did you have a mentor or consultant or anybody to help guide you? Or how has that process worked?
Oh, yeah. We have overseers. One big influence was Pastor Larry Stockstill. He's in Louisiana, but he's trained in a bunch of pastors like Chris Hodges. Some of the largest churches in the U.S. came out of his church in Louisiana. And I went through a school with him, a 3-month program, and he made everybody do it. And so that was that's what got me on the planning schedule. And I talked to we have some great overseers at Upper Room. Josh Lipscomb's one of them. He pastors Liberty Church, pretty large church in Pensacola, probably the largest. And he does that as well. But I was hearing this from my overseers and pastors that have been in this a long time, but I just wasn't doing it. I was kind of stuck in the way I'd like to do things. And, I was kind of week to week, or I would plan out maybe a month or two, but just planning out the year. And we started doing that about 2 years ago. That just changed so much with preparing the messages. It's just been so helpful.
Such an important thing for people to hear, right? Like in whatever area of your life, like there's a better way, right? And you probably know it, right? But take action on it and actually do it and apply it to your life and see how much better your life gets. I think about health. I think about exercising. Like it's hard to eat right. It's hard to go work out, but your life gets a lot better because of it. Can you and it's hard being overweight and not feeling good and mentally, not clear. So I think that's an important concept, that people are listening to take away for sure. And you do have a gift, but I think that in public speaking and speaking in general, however, if you didn't prepare, it's not like God plants this gift and you're just naturally good at it. You still have to prepare. You still have to practice and really cultivate that gift. Talk to me a little bit about that concept, right? Of like being called to something, but then you're still required to put in the work to be good at it. To whom much is given, much is required, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think we can create gifts. I really believe God has given every person unique gifts, but it is our responsibility to steward those gifts. And I think about the parable of the talents, and not everybody's gifted at the same level, but some people will take, they can take 2 and double it. The guy that had 5 talents, he doubled. But the guy that had the 1, he didn't enhance his gift. He didn't invest in it. He just put it in the ground. And I think it is God gives us these gifts, whatever it may be, but then it's up to us to enhance them and to use them. And I think, that takes a lot of time and a lot of stewardship, and I didn't feel gifted. And there's days where I still don't. But when I first started public speaking, it was very difficult. I did not feel gifted at all. I mean, I felt called, but I didn't really see the gifting. And, but nobody's good at anything the first time. I had to just keep putting in the time, and I would speak anywhere they would, they'd let me. Most of it was like in nursing homes. That's where I really cut my teeth on public speaking. But then I was getting 5 hours a week public speaking when I worked at Pepsi, when I went into this certain role and I was doing all the safety meetings and team meetings and QB meetings. And so I was prepping material, sharing it with management, sharing it with, sometimes the whole company, which is, a couple hundred employees. That's where I feel like I really cut my teeth with public speaking and getting more confident on being in front of people and the retaining information. That's where I started doing the handout stuff where they could write it down, because I was noticing nobody remembered anything I would say. But if they seen it and they wrote it down and they heard it, they might remember 10%, And so it just took a lot of time, a lot of hours. But I'm getting now to where it's enjoyable, but I think even in the beginning stages when I first started, it was just so nerve wracking and just the nerves. Like it was just really hard to keep going and keep doing it.
Yeah, it is such an important thing for people to hear, right? It's enjoyable now because you've gotten some confidence and you're good at it, right? And anytime we're doing something that we're good at, it gets more fun, right? And it's like you can try different things and say different jokes or point at people or, like do different things because you've got a little confidence now. People have acknowledged your gift and you've spent tons of time on it. But at the beginning, it doesn't feel like a gift, right? And it's tough and it's embarrassing and you have to sacrifice and do all the things. We're recording this early May. You are currently working through an awesome series called Running with the Giants. And this is very fitting, I think, for this podcast. It's Legacy Builders is on the high performers and, what are you leaving to other people and how are you making uplifting people and encouraging people? Not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, you talked about dreams, right? You went deeper into examples and stories about dreams. I'm interested if you feel comfortable sharing. If not, it's okay. But what are some you talk about this concept, God-sized dreams, right? To where it feels kind of like scary to even share with people because you're like, oh man, people are going to think I'm crazy. Or what are some God-sized dreams that you're currently chasing or praying into?
Yeah, that's a great question. One that's it's almost at the finish line. I've been working on I feel like God gave me a dream that I wanted to just write a book. And I've been working on this thing for 7 years. And so I'm getting really close to finishing it this year, which I'm excited about. Trade wins. And that's been something that I've kind of put on the back burner a lot, and it was kind of in my heart. It was a dream. It's the people I look up to the most, a lot of the pastors, they have a writing gift too. And so I've been chasing this for a while. And so that's been a big one. I'm staying in one really. As a church, we were mobile for a long time. We rented and, being able to buy a building that was ours and was a big deal. It was a dream for 5-6 years. And then the opportunity came. But I think out in front, I'd love to see God continue to expand his church, and I'd love to see him, reach more people through Upper Room. And so I'm hopeful. I don't think this would be our last campus. I'm praying over different cities and different towns and looking, to equip leaders who can maybe step into these campuses and continue to lead. And, but yeah, I think it's really cool to see dreams, to see them fulfilled. But then it's like also having those out front and having people to like encourage you to keep dreaming. That is one of the cool things about this church. There are some men and women in this church where I'll share vision with them and they're like, man, you could probably upsize that. Yeah. You've been able to do that for me, just sitting with you, our men's group. And I think sometimes I kind of can dream too small. And, but no, there's really cool things out front that I'm looking to. But I would say this book I've been working on is something that it's been a dream for a while.
So it's called Trade Winds. What is the book about?
So it's about just the divine force of progress and change. And so it's based out of Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything, a season for everything, but it's really about tapping into the divine rhythms of life and not trying to swim against an incoming tide kind of thing, and seeing these rhythms and using them to our advantage to do what God's called us to do.
I love it. I love it. Divine force of progress and change. And you said you've been working on this for 7 years?
Yeah. And it's kind of, I hate to admit it, but it's a small book. But it's been, like I'll take trips. Like if I do a study break, or I'll write a few chapters. And so I've really just taken my time. Some months I might only, write just a paragraph, but I've really tried to just take it slow, and feel like it's at the point where I want to share it with the world, and I feel good about it. And so, but it's been one of those dreams. It's been in my heart a while. I just haven't been able to get it to the finish line. And so I feel like this is the year.
I can almost guarantee I know the answer to this, but like when you first had that dream or you first started putting pen to paper 7 years ago, did you feel almost like silly to verbalize that you were going to write a book?
Oh yeah. I didn't tell anyone. Yeah, I waited about a year to tell Caitlin, and I only I shared what I had written to that point, and because again we're going back to Sundays now. Yeah, I kind of bounced it off of her to see is this any good at all? Am I just kind of she read it, and she's actually been helping me with some of the copy edits to get it finished up. But it was inspired by, our first series that we did as a church, 2017. We did a series called Trade Winds. And Mark Anderson, who's one of our elders, he's in heaven now, he gave me a book, a little kind of biography. It's I don't know, it's a tiny book about when they discovered the trade winds, Columbus and some of the early sail. Like the world was so much smaller, and when they discovered the trade winds, it like opened up all these new trade routes. There's whole new continents. If you look at maps from just a few hundred years ago, the world has drastically changed because they found these trade wind routes. No, they don't really matter now anymore. But yeah, it was all kind of birthed out of that. And when Mark passed last year, and so I think that kind of helped me, kind of gave me the nudge to, all right, you need to, finish this.
Did Mark know that you're writing a book called Trade Winds?
No, I never told him. And he let me keep the book he gave me too. I've got a couple books. He gave me a book on sailing and then that Trade Winds book. But no, I didn't tell him. Yeah. I'll have to tell Nikki, his wife. Yeah.
So at what point have you shared this? Have you shared this with anyone?
I just gave a few copies to some of our team, our staff here. And then I have I hired someone to look through it, a publisher, and he, made some changes. And so I went through and made all the finishing kind of copy changes that they suggested. And so, yeah. And then I have another, it's actually the same. At the time, it was just one guy, but he designed our Upper Room logo. He's helping me design the cover and different graphics. I'm going to put a few images in the book. And so he's helping me draw those.
That's awesome. I haven't even shared with really anyone besides my team and Peyton, and I'm at the early stages of writing a book and kind of similar deal. It's been on like my goal list, and I'm a big goal guy. And, as a long-term goal, and then things have happened in my life. I lost my mother-in-law recently. I lost my dad early, and it's like, man, why not now? Right. But quick, funny story. So I finally decide, I'm like, all right, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to write it right now. And I was down at the end of the dock, like early morning. God was speaking to me and he's like, put pen to paper, start writing it. And before I did that, this is super early before anyone's up, right? Peyton wakes up. I'm brushing my teeth before to go into work. And I tell her, I'm like, hey, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to do it right now. And I'm going to finish it before the year's over. And she goes, do you have enough wisdom yet to write a book? And I said, maybe not, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to write it anyway. So it's good to have those spouses who keep you grounded.
That's right.
But
it's great.
That's like a God-sized dream that you're about to see to fruition, right? And then you mentioned kind of some of the forward-looking God-sized dreams that you have of potentially, I hadn't heard that before, potentially planting churches in different cities. So this is a early, part of it. Like you're forward-looking. Do you have a time frame set to that?
I don't, and I know that may be lack of planning, but I think, with campuses, it's really more about people than it is buildings. And I mean, you got to have the resources, you got to have, I think the cash and the capital to move on opportunities. But I'm looking at it more of investing in the leaders that we have here and some of the staff and team that we have. And calling out the gifts and then giving them opportunities. Because I really think it's more about people than it is, a location or a building or good opportunity on a space. And so I've looked at it more as that's the work I should be doing right now in pouring into our team and, kind of speaking vision into their life and seeing if that's something they could see themselves doing at some point.
That's a test of real leadership, right? Which is multiplying leaders and building other leaders up. What is your personal strategy or thought process around building other leaders up?
My goal has been when, that everybody at some point is going to probably leave. The people that start with you are probably not going to build with you, and the people that build with you are probably not going to finish with you. And so I've always tried to keep this perspective that if people serve here at Upper Room or they work here, that they look back on their experience and say, I'm a better person because of my time there. And it's the whole good to great thing. What if we invest all this in our people and they leave? Well, it's like, well, what if you don't and they stay? Setting up systems right now, we Tuesdays are all team meeting, and I try to bring something really good and encouraging, but we're going through a book together all year long. We're doing some kind of study but then I think lately it's been just bringing people along with me. If I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to do a study day. This is how I do it. When I pull up quarterly financial, hey, this is what I look for in our giving. This is what I look for in our expenses. And I think that's been probably the strategy I'm trying to do better with. I've kind of been siloed in some, you start a business, you do it all. It was same with the church. I mean, it was like I wore 15 hats, I feel like. And so now I've tried to be, more open-handed. There's nothing I do that people can't see. And then, being more invitational on the journey.
Yeah, love that. I'm interested to hear so just life in general, right? You have a son, you like to serve, hunt, fish, you're building a church, and a church that's expanding rapidly. What habits or disciplines do you have to help keep you stay spiritually grounded?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. And I can't say that I've always done this, but I think my big stacking habit is getting in the Word immediately in the mornings. For a long time, I would waste so much EQ and energy and time just scrolling. I'd get my phone out, going straight to email or whatever, breaking news, Twitter, like there's all the, So lately I've done a lot better with first thing in the morning, I'm in the Word, and I've been on Bible reading plans throughout the years, but right now I'm doing the wisdom literature. So I'll do a psalm and a proverb, or like Ecclesiastes and a proverb, a couple chapters right out of the gate in the morning. And that, I feel like that sets the temperature for me for the whole day. And I try to protect that time. If I can't do it, if my son's up bright and early or something, I try to make a priority that I'm doing that first before I take a meeting or before I start, studying or whatever, working on Sunday, that I'm, making time to get in the Word for me and try to hear from God for me the best that I can. And I haven't always done that as a pastor. There was months, if not years, where I felt like I was so busy that I didn't have time to do that. I needed to get up and go. I had emails, I had meetings and all this stuff. And man, it led to burnout over and over. And thankfully, I feel like God's given me a grace the last year or so, and I've made that just really important. And even mornings, like protecting your mornings, like, do I really need to meet, before 8 or 9? Is it and trying to give myself the time to get in the Word, to take care of my family, take care of my soul health. And, I thought that was being selfish for a long time, but now I'm starting to see I can't really be 100% if I'm not doing that.
I'm glad you touched on that, because that's where I was going to go with that, right? Like we get in our head that you spend this time to yourself and that's selfish, but you can't show up for others if you don't give yourself a little bit of grace and give yourself that time with the Lord. And whatever your morning routine is, I'm a firm believer that all high performers and people that are doing great things with their life and serving others, they have a strict morning routine. Right. And some people are wired differently and do they're night owls. However, regardless, you have to have a morning routine if you get up at 4 a.m. or 7 a.m. Right. And that's to set the tone, because we all get pulled in so many different directions throughout our life. But if you don't have that base to come back on to start, then it's hard to really show up your best self. So I think that's extremely important. So a couple more questions and we'll wrap this thing up. When you think about your life decades from now, what legacy do you hope to leave?
Wow. Well, I want to be famous in my house. I want the people closest to me to love me the most and want to be with me. I think that would be the biggest, number one. My immediate family, we love each other. We're having fun together. My son wants to be around me. My wife, we're still loving each other and we're in love and we're dating and, all that stuff. I think that would be number one. And that's a really good question, because I think what legacy means, you're planting seeds, you're planting oak trees under which the shade you'll never sit. And so, trying to leave everything that's in my stewardship better than I found it. And so if that's church, if that's within the community, whatever it is God has, placed me in leadership or I'm serving, that we leave it better, that we steward it well. And that I think also too, like experiences, like that people look back and what do they get when they get me? Was it depressing to be around me? Was it depressing to work with me? Or was it, or was it like, man, that was enjoyable. It was life-giving. I think too, like, hopefully somewhere in there, people see the glory of God, that there's this understanding that, like, self-leadership didn't do this, that God gets glory in, whatever that shape or form that is, but that his name is lifted up. And because that really, at the end of the day, no one's going to really remember us. Our name is we have a little short window here to do it, what we're put here to do. And I think the more that we can give God the glory and look to him, and the more that we can point people that direction, and I hope that's what people see.
I can't speak for the first one because I'm not in your home, but I can speak for the second and third one. And I think that you're definitely enhancing the community. You're definitely showing up in the best way to make others better. You've made my life better. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for my life. And you've been an instrumental role in my faith journey and, just in my life in general. I value our time that we spend together. I value our friendship and your role, of inspiration and faith, and definitely see God's life plan through you. So I appreciate you. I appreciate that. I'd like to end it on, what piece of advice do you have for the next generation of spiritual and business leaders?
That is a good question. I would say invest in you and your family and make that a very big priority early on. I think I'm hitting back on the, investing in yourself. It feels selfish sometimes that you're investing in your family, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to show up for you, and they're the ones that are, they're under your roof, and anything that's good for you personally and good for your family is good for whatever you lead. And so if that's a church, if that's a business, it doesn't matter. And people won't invest in you if you won't invest in yourself. And so I would say, put in the time, make well-being a priority. Soul health, spiritual health, mental health, like make that a top priority, and everything on the periphery will kind of fall under that.
That's awesome. And it's so true. On that note, what's one book besides the Bible that has changed your life?
God Psychiatry by Charles Allen. He was a Methodist pastor in Atlanta for decades, and he would prescribe scripture to people like medicine. He would prescribe the book of Psalms or a beatitude, and he wrote a little book. And the reason I love it is it's a little book called God Psychiatry. And that book, that's one of my yearly reads. I've probably given away 50 copies of it. It's an incredible book.
Can we make that our next book at our men's?
I'm actually thinking about that.
I haven't read it.
God Psychiatry. It is a game changer. He passed away, but he's an incredible author. Charles Allen, kind of old school, but it's really good. Verse by verse through Psalm 23 and the Lord's Prayer. It's powerful.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, I'm super grateful that you came on for the show. I think the listeners will take something. If the listeners don't take anything away from it, know that I did. I've got a page full of notes. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you do for me and my family. And yeah, thanks.
Kyle, man, you have a beautiful family. I love you, man, and Peyton, and I'm so grateful to know you. You've been a gift to me and my family. And so the privilege really is mine. Thank you.
Awesome. So if people want to get a hold of you or reach out to learn more about Upper Room Church and yourself, how can they reach out?
Yeah, upperroompensacola.com. That's our website, and that has, everything we have going on. My contact information's on there. It's kind of a long domain, but yeah, upperroompensacola.com. And that's, when we gather and meet, Sunday mornings, 9:00 in Gulf Breeze at the Nightingale campus. right behind the elementary school, and then 11 on Pensacola Beach. And so if they ever wanted to visit.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and highly encourage anyone that's on the fence, definitely come out and check out Upper Room. So with that, that'll do it. Appreciate everybody. Thank you.